So I'm lucky enough to have on the podcast today Emily Cannon. Emily A illustrates on Instagram. Emily's an incredible artist who I first ran into at Comic-Con, Tampa Bay Comic-Con, I don't know, 4 years ago or so. Do you remember?
I don't think it was 4 years ago, but yeah, it was in the years though.
Yeah. I mean, was it pre-pandemic or post?
It was post. It was definitely post.
Okay. So, like, I kind of feel like I somehow forgot you existed the last couple years because you're not on Facebook and I'm not on Instagram. But, like, kind of going back and catching up with all the things you have made since I first ran into you, it's insane. Like, I feel like you're, like, 4 years ahead of me where my business is at, so I'm really excited to kind of see what you've been up to. So, please introduce yourself to the audience. Tell us what you do.
Yeah, and I would say, first off, measuring where we are in art is so weird. You can't even do it linearly because it is such a strange field to be in. But yeah, to the public, I am Emily Cannon, Emily A Illustrates. I am an illustrator and comic artist and a future therapist. So,
okay.
Yeah, life takes a lot of turns.
So I know you mentioned before when you were filling out the form to help me prepare for this that you are working on your master's right now to get into therapy.
I am.
So are you still planning on doing art? You winding that down? You going to combine them? How is that going to happen?
So my thing is, I just want, because as I mentioned before, art is a weird field to be in, and I was getting to a point where doom scrolling, I saw a bunch of things happening in the art world, and I wanted a little sense of stability. So I thought, now would probably be the best time for me to go and get, I don't want to say a real degree, but a degree that looks good to people on paper, you know? So my plan is therapy is something I've always been drawn to. I really believe in it. I feel as though it's something I'm maybe good at. And it also works in a schedule where it's flexible so I can still work on my art.
Okay, good. So you're not giving it up.
No, I would never do that. But it just allows me to kind of make a little bit more time and not worry about making art purely for other people and being able to make art for myself again.
Well, I think that's probably a good way to kind of provide context for the listeners as to what type of art you do make. So, if just off the bat, what percentage of the work you make would you say is commission-based versus what percentage is just an idea you had that you'll wholly own the rights to?
So, for the majority of my professional work, it's commission-based. I would say it's 60-30. 60% is commission-based, but 30% I'm very lucky that I had a few ideas take off. One of the things we actually have in common is the Kickstarter situation, and I'm lucky enough that I have people enjoy my original ideas. But the things that pay the bills are the commissions, are the freelance work.
Okay. It's funny, like, for me, I like that I have those commissions as a fallback, but when I look at my annual income, the biggest percentage of it is my Kickstarter projects, and as well as, like, the continual sales of leftover Kickstarter inventory. So commissions are nice. They keep things moving. They keep my, my Adobe Cloud monthly fee paid, and my internet and my, all that stuff going. But, like, what I live for and what I strive for is those Kickstarter-based projects. Do you feel the same way?
I would say Kickstarter was incredible in helping me get like my own ideas to actually start making money, and it's really good for the marketing side of things.
Hmm.
Like, because a lot of times it's just for artists, the biggest thing is exposure.
Right.
Like, and this isn't doing free art for exposure. It's just getting the marketing so that
Hmm.
your idea is out there so that people get it, because we live in a time where social media is just rife with like ideas flying at you, and Kickstarter does a pretty good job of organizing actual products that people can actually support.
That's
So,
one thing that I'm always constantly telling people is, yes, Kickstarter is a tool to offset production costs, but its main benefit is it gets your brand in front of thousands of eyes all over the world that you would never be able to pay an ad to get. Like,
oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I know you've seen this too. When you're looking at a Kickstarter project, it gives you the refers on like how people found your project, what percentage, how many, how much income came from each one of those things. And you could create custom links to put on your Instagram, your Facebook, to put in ads, put on Reddit till you're blue in the face. But the overwhelming majority of people are going to find your project because they were just browsing Kickstarter for stuff, or Kickstarter recommended it to them.
Yeah, no, it's really incredible. Like, I remember when I did my last Kickstarter, just going through all the different countries my stuff would be going to. And I think it's really good because it also forces artists to actually think as a marketing like business, like what is a physical product that people want.
Mm-hmm.
Because I
Yeah.
think as artists, we always love the idea, we love the concept, but getting down to the brass tacks of making something tangible that can be bought, I wouldn't say is consistently the strongest sense on a whole.
It's funny because like I exactly agree with what you're saying. It does force you to think of your art as a project manager, as a production company, as a manufacturing company, as a distribution company, not just as someone who makes the art. And I was shocked that I enjoy all of that as much as making the art. And it's not like I never find myself longing to just sit and draw because I really want a final product that I can hold in my hand and show to people. And maybe it's just because, well, you and I are similar in that we're digital artists, and like digital art is rarely a physical product. So making it a physical product feels like an emotional legitimacy that you don't get otherwise. I don't know, you probably don't feel the same way, but that's
No,
how I feel.
no, I think it really is one because I mean, especially today, digital art is always under fire in terms of legitimacy.
Hmm.
But just having like again, not to completely be like, oh, Kickstarter is fantastic, but it really sets up in a really intuitive way. Like they do provide a whole bunch of ways for you to break down costs and like, they do a really good job of forcing people to do that. And when it comes to your own project, having those kind of models and those kind of sheets about something you're already like super enthusiastic about, it really just helps. Like I never thought of myself as like, oh, I'm really into marketing. But when it came to like figuring out how the layout of my Kickstarter page was gonna look, and I went a little above and beyond. Like I made animated GIFs and
Hmm.
everything for my first one. It really just kind of helped you like get excited about it.
Do you ever? I'm constantly saying this to myself when I'm building Kickstarter, so I wonder if you ever say it to yourself either. But do you ever think to yourself, "Oh, I'm so glad I know how to make these graphics myself"? Because if I had to wait for someone else to send me these, it would take months to build this thing. But I could just be like writing the text and be like, "Oh, I should put a graphic in here." 20 minutes later, I got a graphic and I can keep writing. So nothing holds us back, and it's such an exciting feeling.
And even if you just have the building blocks for that thing, I'm a big fan of YouTube tutorials. And like,
Hmm.
if there's a certain kind of style I want to do for like an animation, I I love being able to know the technology, but also being able to understand tutorials so I can get it because exactly what you
Hmm.
said. if I send it away, like, these people are going to do a good job, but my project is not their top priority. And I can
Right.
guarantee you, as a freelance artist, my budget is not their top priority. And it shouldn't be.
Well, let's talk a bit about. I mean, we don't have to spend the whole time talking about Kickstarter, but we absolutely could because it comes up a lot on
Unless
this
Kickstarter
podcast.
is paying us.
But you are the first person I've had on the podcast that has made enamel pins, and that's also how I started. Well, actually, my first project was a coloring book, but then my second, third, and like fifth were all enamel pins. So, is that how you started with the enamel pins?
For Kickstarter, yeah. So, it's an interesting thing because I ended up, while I was living in Colorado, I ended up with some friends who were in the con industry, the convention, like anime, like comic conventions. And I had already done one and I planned to do more, but alas, the pandemic kind of like put a halt on that. In the meantime, I made these new friends. And they were telling me all about enamel pins. And I had never done enamel pins before. And they said, well, if you want to get, if you know, like, it's pretty easy to pick up in terms of, like, when you have someone guiding you through. They're like, well, you could always make a Kickstarter if you're unsure about whether or not these would sell or not. And yeah, enamel pins are, they're quite the industry.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, ultimately I wanted to make board games because that's what I was obsessed with.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I also do very like cartoony graphic. I was mostly illustrating in Adobe Illustrator at the time. And I was like, well, I've got these designs that sell well as like little pieces of art and as stickers. Why not turn them into pins? So I got my most successful designs, designed those as pins, got a price quote, and like also when you're like researching similar projects on Kickstarter, you see how well pins do. So, what was your process for finding a manufacturer, and like, did you do samples? How well did that Kickstarter go? How did you sell leftovers?
So again, I was very lucky with my group of friends who were able to recommend me. Obviously, a lot of us, I'm not sure if this is safe for you, but we find our manufacturers through Alibaba just because it's the
Yeah,
simplest way
me
to
too.
get a manufacturer. And I was very lucky. I had friends who recommended a specific manufacturer for me. And their customer service person was really good about turnaround and like getting me quotes and stuff like that. And I didn't really have to do the samples. I didn't do the samples physically. I just did the, when they show you the kind of like test one, being like, hey, is there anything we need to fix before we send these to you? So it kind of, I kind of like got a lot of help. I shouldn't say kind of. I did get a lot of help in getting my pins to me, and it was a pretty smooth. It was smooth, except for the fact that I did not expect the Kickstarter to do quite as well. I was not expecting the turnout that I did. So you kind of underestimate volume. Like when doing research for a lot of them, you see like maybe 100 or 200 people sign up, and that's reasonable. But I was sending out things for a solid month.
Mm.
So
So the manufacturer I've used and have ever used since then, always used since then, is JC Basic. Is that the same company you use or
it
no?
is probably it's not, no.
Okay. Have you
Um,
noticed that there's like a special art to communicating with Chinese manufacturers? Like I so like when I'm telling people like to do how to do it, I'm like, okay, only ask one question at a time because if you ask five, you'll only get a response to one of them. They're probably going to be running those through Google Translate, so use short sentences. Whenever possible, do a diagram of what you're trying to get made so that they could see that. Do you have any
honestly,
things you've learned like that?
I don't want to say I had a great relationship with my liaison for the company, but she was phenomenal, and
Okay.
we were sending emojis and stuff like that. Like I didn't really have
Nice.
a like we just hit it off like in terms of like business wise, where she was like, that looks good. I was like, that looks phenomenal, and then she sent back a little heart with a like smiley face. I was like, shiny heart back, and just like So I didn't really
Awesome.
get a sense of like I gotta parse them out, but I would say I am not the best with um, email or text,
Mhm.
mostly because I constantly it's like a battle between me not wanting to be glued to my technology all the time, and
Mhm.
then me realizing, oh wait, but I have business that I need to do with technology. So they would, I did get a couple messages off of Alibaba, just like direct email saying, hey, we texted you this about an hour ago. Like,
Mm.
can we get a response? And I'm like, sorry. But that was the only thing. Like, they would just be like, we need an answer now.
It is kind of funny. Like I've worked with manufacturers that just communicate on Alibaba. I've worked with some who only communicate through WhatsApp, and some who only communicate through email. So it gets a
Mhm.
little tedious to track. Like, wait, who was it that made the mouse pads again? And then I got to go back and figure out like how I talk to them.
Absolutely.
And
And
then
I
sometimes
try
you'll
to
get
keep it,
contacted by like five agents from the same company, and you're like, wait, who's the one I was working on? Because they all showed up when
yeah.
I search.
No, yeah, I try to keep it all in Alibaba. Like, I don't, if they
Mhm.
when they email me, I don't respond to their email. I go to Alibaba just
Mhm.
that way. Because I know I will also get confused about where
Mhm.
the thread goes. And also, I just like having call me the true crime, like, like person, but I'm like, I gotta need physical evidence in case something happens and they send me the wrong thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good point. Uh, so let's talk then about your software. Are you primarily doing your digital stuff on Procreate or using other software?
I am currently using Procreate for all of my drawings, for all my digital drawings. I am getting back into more um, traditional uh, art pieces, but for digital, I'm primarily on Procreate, and for layout for things like my books, for like comics and stuff like that, I'm using Affinity Publisher.
Oh, okay. So,
Yeah.
is there a reason why you don't go the Adobe route on anything?
I do, well, so here's my thing. Adobe, like I'm on a iPad. Adobe's iPad app is terrible.
I believe it.
Procreate was designed for the iPad, and
Hmm.
therefore the sizing is so intuitive. They do a really good job of making sure like it's easy for you to find the right buttons. Procreate just was like, what if we made it smaller? And because there's so many options, or not Procreate, Adobe Photoshop made it smaller, and thus because there's so many options, it's a pain to like
Hmm.
finagle all the things that I usually do. So I just ended up making the switch to Procreate. And since Adobe has started doing the whole AI integration, I've been seriously considering canceling my
Mm,
Adobe subscription. So
I get that. I would like to like I mean, I still buy stuff off of Amazon, even though I don't like the company, you know. So,
yeah. Oh
it's
yeah.
it's the same way I feel with Adobe, but I am in Adobe programs so much that I can't really give it up. Every day I'm in Adobe Illustrator.
Hmm.
I'm working on a couple books right now, so I'm in Adobe InDesign every day.
Yeah.
Um, but when it comes to doing actual art and illustration, I'm exclusively sorry. When it comes to putting stylus on screen, it is almost exclusively Clip Studio Paint for me.
Oh,
But
that is a good one.
well, that's also because I've only ever worked in a Windows environment,
Hmm.
except for when I was in like high school and we were learning Mac stuff.
Yeah.
But like, uh, are you on an iPad Pro or regular iPad?
I'm on an iPad Pro, and then I have my desktop situation, which still has Photoshop on it. Like
Okay.
it's the weighing of it. But that one is it's hooked up PC. It's not a
Okay.
Mac. So I kind
Gotcha.
of have a dual system going.
Do you use Apple Pencil?
For my Procreate,
Yeah.
my iPad, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I've tried alternative ones, and unfortunately, I say that because as an artist, the whole price point does come into play. Apple is the most efficient,
Hmm.
like, intuitive one. But for my Wacom tablet, I use like the Wacom uh, stylus.
Okay, but most of the time though, you are drawing on the iPad, right?
Yeah, mostly because I'm usually for most of the day I am away from my desk.
Yeah.
So
So, say you're working on. Sorry, are you using Affinity Designer on your iPad too?
I am not because Procreate's been working so well, but I've just been using Affinity Publisher.
Oh, sorry, that's what I meant. A
So,
publisher, sorry.
yeah,
And that's an iPad app too.
it's an iPad app and it's a desktop app as well.
So, like for
Like
example, your comic book that you've been putting together, you do that all completely on the iPad. You don't need to bring files over to the computer to do the
so the
layouts.
the comic I worked on was through Harper, and I didn't have to do any of the formatting. I just had to make the art.
Oh,
So I was
okay.
very lucky. They were like, "Hey, do you have any experience with lettering?" And I said, "This is my first big project. I prefer someone else to letter just so I can kind of
Hmm.
see what you guys are looking for my next project."
Mm. So, like
But
the reason why I have these questions is because, like in my mind, there's a dialogue that the iPad may be great to do the art, but you can't be finished with it on the iPad. You still have to take it to a computer to like do all your different exports, reformatting, resizing,
yeah,
doing all that stuff. And
so
I don't know
I
if that's
do.
true.
Yeah, no, I do have Publisher on my iPad. I just prefer the layout of the desktop because it's such a larger like screen that I can do like multiple windows
Hmm.
open as reference. Whereas the iPad is kind of a set screen, and I just don't like working small. I like having a larger space to work.
Okay. Well, so that was one of the main reasons why I decided to go all in the Windows environment. Is I draw
Hmm.
on a Windows Surface Studio, which is a decently sized laptop, and the screen pops down flat, so I can
Oh
draw
yeah.
right on it. Plus, with Clip Studio Paint, I also have this little guy, which is like a little controller that I can map buttons to, and it's got a little
Hmm.
wheel, and so I can be super efficient with it, which is nice to keep that on my offhand while I draw. And then I love that, like, if I've done a whole bunch of illustrations and now it's time for me to lay out the book, I just pop the screen back up and open up Adobe InDesign, and I don't have to move from one environment to the other or move files from one to the other.
So the thing with the files is since I used my OneDrive account extensively,
Oh,
so because
okay.
I have them both logged in and a lot of things just instantly back up to OneDrive, I really don't have to move a lot of files. I just have to like you said, close it down, open in the other. Like I don't have to bother with the finagling of which folder did I put it in.
So, like, my work laptop has OneDrive, and I don't know how it works. I just save stuff to the machine, and like if I need to send it to someone, I just put it as an attachment. I know I could spend 5 minutes learning how it works, but I'm just annoyed that like I feel like Microsoft keeps shoving the OneDrive down my throat. And the other day, I turned on my computer, and now it's got a new AI assistant. It's like nobody used
Oh yeah.
Cortana, so now they throw in Copilot.
To be fair, Google's doing the same thing. Like I make one wrong click and it's like, "Hi, I'm Gemini," and I'm like, "No, get away from me." But yeah, no, I mean this is obviously it's I wouldn't say it's the most efficient use, but it is the use that I have, and I kind of have become I really kind of love. I've only done Publisher, but I've been really loving Affinity's like InDesign kind of like alternative because I'm not a fan of the subscription payment plan, and Affinity is one set like, and I've used InDesign before, and Affinity's a really good alternative.
Oh.
That's like a set price, and then you're done.
I know. Yeah. I don't like that I have to pay monthly for Adobe. I don't use any cloud storage with them. I do use the Adobe sites, just because like
Hmm.
I have my main website, Chain Assemblies, all my products. That's all GoDaddy and Shopify.
Yeah.
But then I do have Adobe Portfolio has a thing where you can create like 5 different websites. Just super WYSIWYG drop whatever. And I have nickribera.com, which is like my
Hmm.
commission based portfolio. Like here are things I've done as layouts, here are logos I've done, here are whatever. So it's nice kind of having that, and it ties automatically into Lightroom, the Lightroom software, so I could just drag a file into a folder and it's reflected on the website, which is super convenient. But
That
like,
truly.
I'm not really using like, and also most of the new updates that come to these software I don't really need. So
Yeah.
I see what you're
The
saying, but
the thing that really like is making me hard to hit that delete button on the Adobe thing is their library of fonts.
oh
I am
yeah,
such
Adobe
a
Fonts is
stickler
great.
for fonts.
Oh, I probably have
Yeah,
like 500 fonts on this computer. I really wish
exactly.
there was a way to organize them and like give them personal ratings. Because like you sort it by like sans serif, and it's really up to whoever created the font to label it as sans serif.
Oh yeah,
So,
it's yeah. No, and I'm such like I think a lot of my my art college friends have memories of me when I had to do poster design, and I would just spend like hours like sifting through the fonts. I'm like, I gotta find the right one.
yeah. So like the tarot project that I've been working on now that I have on Kickstarter is I'm making each card look like a movie poster from Italy from the 70s. So I've
Right.
been really falling in love with poster design, and I've been having fun with so many different fonts. It's been great.
I probably I didn't mention this, but I do come from a military family, and I actually lived in Italy for
Oh,
three
yeah.
years. And honestly, the pulp Italian movie like vibes are so good.
Oh, that's awesome. I don't think you did mention that to me, but that's really cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, I want to ask you about Comic Cons. I had a bad experience. By bad, I mean I didn't make a lot of money, and didn't get a lot of attention at that Comic Con. Primarily because I don't really do a lot of fan art. Like I was looking through your Instagram and your Facebook, and you have some really cute Pokemon there. So, do you like do art specifically for Comic Con stuff, or like kind of what's your relationship with Comic Cons?
So because so my whole thing is, and again, there's a reason why I love doing comics, why I love doing narrative art, is because I do believe story is what sells. People like to relate to things, so if you have a story, you can get away without doing fan art. However, if you do not have a story, if you don't have like a set thing that people can instantly relate to, and you do have a story, you have these wonderful tarot decks, but I didn't have a set canon that people would immediately recognize, and so I did make a rule for me when it came to Comic Cons that I had to do 50% fan art, 50% original stuff,
Okay.
and that was my rule. And it's just for Comic Cons. I'm not saying I don't love doing fan art, and I actually make a rule of I only do fan art for things that I enjoy
Hmm.
because I don't want to do like a hopping on trend thing, but it has to be one a thing I've enjoyed, and two 50% of my stuff is fan art until I get to that point where I have a lexicon of like stories that people can recognize.
I like that you set that rule for yourself. So, if you have like a Comic Con coming up in a month or so that you're going to be vending at, do you make new art for that, or are you constantly like reusing old stuff?
So I like giving myself too much work. So I do, I do say to myself, I have to have at least five new pieces because I believe in making the Comic Con experience a unique one, no matter when someone meets me. Because I'm usually at Tampa Bay Comic Con. I'm usually like a repeat tabler, and so I want people to see new stuff if they see me again. I don't want it to be, like the same thing over and over. And terrible, like do what I do, which is like, I'm going to do like 20 new pieces. Don't do that. That's insane. But yeah,
Hmm.
I do try to make it a new experience.
Do you get, since you do that regularly, do you get to see repeat customers who are excited to see you?
I do. And one of my favorite things is having, because obviously, as as I was once a young teenager obsessed with anime, it's really kind of wonderful seeing the teenagers who want to become more involved in arts, and they come back and they see me, or I'll see them wearing an enamel pin I sold them last year, and I feel actually really bad because, well, no, not about this person, but I do have a friend now who I met just on the other side of the table, and then I have another person that has every time I've gone to Tampa Bay Comic Con, they show up looking for a piece of art that I lost the file for, and they'll never get it,
Oh,
and they always come back asking for it, and I'm like, I, I can't print it for you. So it's kind of wonderful. Like it really kind of is like you. Obviously, I'm sure you've heard of a couple of horror stories, but for me, the experience has been mostly positive and wonderful. Just meeting people.
I love when people recognize me, but I also get disappointed because I know they're probably not going to buy something because they already bought it the first time. I know I shouldn't feel that
Uh,
way, but like I've started to see people like say, "Oh, it's good to see you again. What do you have that's new?" And because I'm making tarot decks, I'm not always going to have something new at each event because it
it
takes a while to
takes
make
a
a whole
long
tarot
time.
deck.
Yeah, it's what 72 cards.
78.
Like,
This new one I'm doing, I'm adding an extra five, so it's going to be 50.
oh
I
my
mean,
god, you do
82,
the same thing I do,
83.
but then more work.
Yeah.
But yeah, no,
Well, you
I
got to
was
do
about to
stretch
say.
goals.
Oh my gosh, stretch goals, absolutely. Yeah, but yeah, your your projects do take a lot more time because you do have you have like to make a whole
Mhm.
collection, and that's kind of a thing why I'm happy I only do prints. Like for the most part, prints and pins because it's a little bit more, it's a little easier
Yeah.
to just bring out a new thing. Um, Yeah, the majority of people who recognize me, they usually don't buy something new because I'm kind of all over the place when it comes to style and stuff like that. And sometimes it just doesn't vibe with what they want.
Hmm.
But it's still nice to know that I made an impact. And I remember, like, it was at Tampa, there was a girl who was like, "Oh, I've seen your stuff. My roommate has your poster on her side of, like, our dorm." And there, I don't know, there's something just kind of wonderful about that because
Hmm.
I'm not like you may not be the same. You may be one of the few artists, maybe I don't know, who is every time you put something out, you're like, "This is the best thing ever. I'm amazing." But most artists I know, we are our own worst critics. Like
Right.
there are times I finish something and I'm like, "This is disgusting. I hate this." And then you have someone look at that piece and they're like, "I want that on my wall. I want to see it every day." And it really kind of just, it really helps. It helps the
Hmm.
like the negativity you have, like the constant comparison you like person comparing yourself to others as an artist.
So, so going back into this idea of like constantly having new stuff, when it comes to enamel pins, do you ever get any made outside of the Kickstarter environment?
Actually, I do. I'm planning on doing for once getting completely new enamel prints made, but I've actually had to do several reorders. And that's because the Kickstarter I did, it was a series of bugs, because I'm
Mhm.
absolutely enamored with entomology. And at the time, I lived in Colorado, and I went to the Maze Natural History Museum, which is purely a bug museum in the mountains of Colorado Springs. And I was saying, "Hey, I make these enamel pens. Do you want to buy them in bulk? Because you're a bug museum, and it just so happens I have all these bugs. And they ordered such a large quantity, I had to do a major reorder.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
So, yeah, again, the bugs, man.
So, like, the first Kickstarter project I did, like I said, was, I mean, way early on, was enamel pins. And of those 4 designs I got manufactured, only 1 has sold out. The other 3 are very close to selling out. And it's like, I do want to get more pins made because I feel like I'm a better designer and I could be a lot more risky with what I'm putting into the design, you know? Like, I have more confidence in the manufacturer than I did with that first order. So I can use thinner lines, I can use more colors, and I know it's not going to affect the cost all as much. Back then I was like, oh, only 1 color per pin, or like only 2 colors per pin. Now I'm like, let's go ham on it, make something insane. And so like, I'm excited to do more pins, but I also feel like it's a wasted opportunity if I don't involve Kickstarter in the project, because I'll be losing out on orders and reducing the cost of manufacturing. But then that also like slows down other things I want to do on Kickstarter. So like, in my mind, I have like my whole year planned in Kickstarter, and I don't want to interfere with that plan. So it's just, it just drives me crazy. I don't know if you feel that same way.
No, like, honestly, I think the biggest drawback to Kickstarter is the need to schedule that amount of time. Because, again, I did not do that the first time I did a Kickstarter, and it really came back to bite me. Like, just not understanding how timing works. And especially, you kind of have to understand when the federal holidays are for Chinese manufacturing, because there's a whole month where they don't do any manufacturing. And you have to be aware of that. I was not, and it did not work out well for me. But I would say it's actually a big thing for Kickstarter is also, besides the exposure you get, it's the fact that you get to gauge how popular certain designs are. And I actually, based on surveys, the first time it was surveys, I actually ordered out of my own pocket. I ordered more of specific pins just because I knew that they were doing well and everyone seemed to want them. So it does feel like you're missing out, especially if you have a whole collection planned. Like if you're kind of unsure if things are going to sell, which is why I do know a lot of people outside of Kickstarter, they do in pre-orders, but because you don't get the marketing that comes with Kickstarter, not a lot of people pre-order, but it does help you kind of, if you have a good following, it does help you gauge like how interested people are. And like, there's a couple of things that I think I'm going to turn into pins later, just based on how much engagement the project got.
So one thing I see, I know we're going back into pins again.
No.
But one thing I see a lot with Kickstarter projects that are pin based, weird way to say that, but Kickstarter pin projects, is they'll add new designs as a stretch goal. And in my mind, that just seems like a recipe for disaster. Because you're still going to have a minimum order quantity, and that opens up a variable that, like, people are probably not going to go back to the project they're already pledged to see if there's something new as an option. I don't know, is that something you did?
It's not something I did, and it's not something it's something I made sure not to do.
Okay.
One, I knew I was going to have stretch goal pins. But when I did my first Kickstarter, I was like, okay, this is the majority number of pins. So I think I've only done 2 Kickstarters. One had 12 pins in total, that's including the stretch goal pins.
Wow.
And the other one had 20.
Jeez, that's a lot of pins.
In the future. Now, a lot of these stretch goals, some of these stretch goals were duplicates, but in a different color variant, which saved on the model cost. But,
I didn't know that was a thing, but that's cool.
Oh yeah, so I did kind of like an alternative yeah, like a kind of like, that oxidized
Hmm.
nickel. I did an
Yeah.
oxidized nickel version of it, so it was a little bit same cost
Ah.
on that, but um, I kept it at that. And if I were to do another enamel pin Kickstarter, I would stick to the 12. I've had friends continually add designs, and it just ended up overwhelming them because they were not the designs they had planned to do. The amazing, amazing project, like really beautiful pins, but for a wellness self care thing, it just absolutely overwhelmed them because I think they ended up having around 55 different parts that they had to manufacture, and that just cut into their time for themselves, making coordinating everything. They ended up going beyond the schedule they had planned, and it left them stressed out. And for me, and I had people who backed my Kickstarters asking me if I was going to do any more pins, and I've been very resolute in just these are the pins. This is my idea for the collection. We're not going to do any more because as artists, our time is money.
Hmm.
Like we have to start putting more value, and that includes putting value on our time off, so that way we don't burn out.
You
So
sound like my wife.
your wife sounds like a very smart woman.
Yeah,
Um,
she's dictated that this podcast. You hear it first here, folks. She's dictated that this podcast is going to be twice a month now, not weekly.
and that is a smart decision. Like
It is.
you, putting together something well less frequently is so much better than burning out and just having to stop it completely. And as someone who is a frequent put all the pots on the stove, have them all boil over, and then take all the pots off, only to do it 2 months later again. Like, don't be me.
So related to that is one thing that I'm always fascinated with is things that do well on Kickstarter don't always translate to things that do well at a market, or vice versa. Like, for example, Satisfy was this adult board game I made for couples, just barely made its funding goal on Kickstarter, but it sells well when I'm able to explain to people at my booth how it works. Because there's things that you can't just like say on a Kickstarter banner, because it takes a dialogue to explain something.
Yeah,
So,
it's very interesting because you bring that up because I think this comes to demographics.
mhm.
Uh, Kickstarter, you can follow people that have done similar ones, and you can also follow friends. And chances are there are pods of friends that all like the same thing. If one of them finds the Kickstarter, all of them learn about the Kickstarter, and if they're interested, they'll pledge. Um, I would argue for this was a board game.
Yeah,
I
it's a
would
board
argue,
game.
I would argue for board game, you have a very different demographic where, especially in cons, where tabletop and board game are kind of the traditional fare for con, and you have the people who this is their annual thing where they go and buy things. Having board games being a part of the traditional like things you would find, I think it just comes down to a case of demographics. Like, I'm not sure if you had to explain to family members what Kickstarter was,
Well,
but
I've never asked any of my family to pledge, so.
my family was very, they were like, now what's this about Kickstarter? Oh, I'll share it. And they're wonderful. I'm very lucky. I have a very
Mm.
supportive, like, large family. Um, and they were just having to explain Kickstarter to them who had never heard of it or like didn't really know what it was
Yeah.
versus the younger generations, which Kickstarter is now like kind of a Kickstarter has its own lore now. Like there's
Hmm.
infamous Kickstarters that have happened. There's the Brandon Sanderson Kickstarter that like
Yeah.
broke records. Like
Hmm.
it's just a different realm of like what like common knowledge is not actually all that common. We all have our own different framing, and it just so happens that I think I'm glad that it got funded because that means that the people who would enjoy it. Sorry, I'm in a study chamber on campus. Um, I'm glad that people that enjoy it get a physical copy because of the Kickstarter. But I think it is just that thing where Kickstarter is just a completely different demographic, which is why I think enamel pins do so well, and a lot of sci-fi and fantasy things do well.
True. It's true. It's not the people who come up to your booth at like a market outside of a bar on like a Saturday night are gonna be like 20 years older than the people who are browsing projects on Kickstarter. So yeah. But it does keep in mind, like, just when it comes to choosing your quantities, you always need to have an avenue capable of selling your leftovers. And that is really what determines the viability of something as a product. Is not just does it well on Kickstarter, but does it do well in the other tools you have to make sales?
Absolutely. And I mean, it's also a thing of deciding your brand as an artist. Like, you, I have, I would say I have two different gigs, with two vastly different art styles, but my nail pins work very well with, a lot of my very children's book, comic book styled art. And so luckily it translates, that's what I choose for my Comic Con tables. It's that that kind of whimsical style. Meanwhile, on the other hand, I have my art I draw horror art on the side
Oh,
for
okay.
cats. So, the, I don't do prints of them because it's kind of weird if someone came up to my table and they're like, this is wonderful, and then you have this horrible eldritch monster print just in the middle of all these very cutesy, like Sanrio type creatures.
Oh, so yeah, I was looking on your Instagram. I'm like, oh, that looks like Tomie, and I guess it is from Junji
Oh
Ito.
yeah,
Yeah,
no, I'm a big fan of Junji Ito.
yeah, awesome. So, can I had my list of questions and I lost them. Oh yeah. So speaking of the Instagram, I saw that you also participated in Mermay, Plain April, Air Pearl. How regularly do you engage with those like Instagram social, whatever you call those?
So I used to get really down on myself for not completing a 30-day challenge, and then I realized that no one was actually following the rules for 30-day challenges. They were preparing months in advance. So now I use it as kind of a way to be very lenient with myself and like, this is fun. I get to be a part of a group thing for a little bit, but I don't beat myself up if I don't complete it, and I only engage if it's a topic I'm really into. I'm a very big fan of mermaids. I want to improve my drawing, which drawing from life will always do. So I only do it if I feel as though it's beneficial to me, and it's a chance to like belong or like be a part of something.
So, I think I feel a little bit similar to you, but in more of an extreme in that I don't think I'll draw anything if I can't turn it into a product. Because it's like I have products that I need to complete before I can waste time just sitting there and doing a drawing. I guess maybe I'm jaded, but I don't know. It works, makes me happy. I'm keeping it that way.
So I would say,
yeah, I've definitely never done any of those challenges.
so I would say it's definitely a thing where, and this goes into why I'm currently pursuing my master's, is that it allows me a little bit more in a completely different field. It allows me a little bit more time to kind of just focus on why I enjoy the thing, why I enjoy art. Because I found that I was only drawing things if I needed to sell things, and I wanted to get back to why I chose this profession in the first place, which was I just love drawing and I love creating things. And I try to make a point now of just drawing things purely for me that make me happy, because otherwise I end up putting stress on myself. Like I have to make a finished product that needs to be able to sell. Otherwise, I won't be able to support myself.
Well, if
And
your
it's
business is a
yeah.
few years ahead of me, then that's probably how I'll be feeling in a couple years.
I hope so because honestly, it kind of lifted a weight off of me
Mm,
just because living my life entirely by deadlines stressed me out. I am not a good
mm,
person with deadlines.
mm.
It's like the anxiety just gets amped up. So,
I live for the deadlines. Like I will build a Kickstarter project and set a launch date on it with like nothing done, just so I have to have it done by then.
you're a stronger, braver person than I am.
So what else do you want to make in the future? Like, do you have any other products you're planning on, or just thinking about, or things you're, I don't know,
So
curious
I'm
about?
actually waiting to hear to see if I have a so I have a graphic novel I'm working on, a kind of secret
Hmm.
graphic novel.
Okay.
I'm waiting to hear if it has a home. I'll hopefully hear back soon if it can fit in with a certain publishing house. I'm currently finishing up a short little 20-page comic that will be available at my next convention. And then I'm also getting back into just writing prose.
Mm,
I told you, I have a lot of pots cooking on the table. I'm just not worried about finishing them because I want to make a good product.
mm-hmm.
So I'm not imposing a deadline. I'm letting it kind of develop organically. Um, so yeah, writing, waiting to hear back on the graphic novel pitch, which I already have kind of quasi finished. I just need to finalize the first draft and then I can get started on the drawing. Finishing up the comic, writing for fun. Oh, shoot, is there anything else I'm doing? Oh, and I'm also working on a tarot deck, but that I put on the burner just because there's a lot of research that goes into this stuff.
Okay. Well, I will say, being in the tarot space is really fun. There's also lots of judgmental people, but that's in any space. So at Localtopia, a woman got mad at me because I said I don't do readings. I just like to create the decks. And she said that was fucked up. And the husband was like, you shouldn't have pissed her off. And I'm like, I'm sorry.
You
Anyways,
can curse me?
anyways, but I will say, going to like a metaphysical event as a person who created a tarot deck, you're going to get a lot of attention and make a lot of sales, because those events are usually like, if anyone's selling tarot decks, it's publishers selling the many tarot decks that they have.
Yeah.
So you really stand out there at those events, and I've really enjoyed, being able to make a lot of sales at a tarot event or a metaphysical event, and there's
I
plenty of metaphysical events.
Yeah, so I do readings for myself. I don't do readings for others. Um, and I think it's weird to do readings for others unless that's
Hmm.
what you do. So that's a wild thing to ask.
Yeah.
um, and I have been to a metaphysical event, so I'm very curious. I'm really this is definitely a a product I've been working on for a long period of time. So I'm really hoping to get it
Mhm.
done, possibly over the summer. Um, but yeah, no, I love the tarot deck community. I also love I'm not sure if you saw there's a tarot deck movie coming out.
Oh no, I did not.
Well, if you know, obviously you do extensive
Mhm.
research on your cards and stuff like that. Um, the entire time I'm watching the trailer, I'm like, that card doesn't mean that. That card doesn't mean it's a horror movie. It's like they're the same people as
Okay.
Gucci. So
Oh,
it's like,
oh, okay, okay. I get
yeah,
it now. I understand. Yeah, it's
that was
funny.
just like
Anytime
sitting there.
someone brings out a tarot card in a movie, I'm like, let me guess, they're gonna pull the death card.
Oh, it's gonna totally be the death card.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, that's not even the worst card.
I know. uh,
So,
Okay.
I kind of get a giggle when like movies play up the tarot deck thing, and I'm like,
Hmm.
huh.
So when you're working on a pitch for a graphic novel and your first draft, are you describing all the panels and what's going to be on each page, or is it really just like a script, like a movie script, like a description of what you see and then the dialogue?
So So, because for the last graphic novel, I was purely the illustrator, and I'm very lucky. Shanae and Chanel were like super wonderful about like if I had little feedback, like I think I suggested one thing where I was like, "Hey, can we do it in this room instead?" Just because I think the lighting would be amazing for this scene. And they were super like I think that's the one thing I asked for them. I was like, "Please, I just would love to draw the scene in like this
Hmm.
area," and they were super okay. But like they gave me a script, and I believe the majority of stuff they do write are TV and movie scripts. So
Mm.
there, it was purely he said, she said, like a description of actions. My style, obviously, I send over when it comes to editors, I would send over a script very much in the same fashion, but the way I write it with drawing because
Hmm.
I like planning out the way that the page layout would look, and the way the page layout looks informs my writing. Because some panels you find you don't really need a line, and it's just it helps me inform how that scene like plays out.
Okay, I
But
gotcha.
yeah, I don't know if that was a good way of explaining it, but like yeah, no, it's very in tandem, which means it's a little bit slower, but it does mean I get two steps done, which is the thumbnailing and the script.
Mm. So I when you do get to working on the final thing, I recommend giving Clip Studio Paint another try because it's kind of like the industry standard for manga and comics. So there's
Mm-hmm.
really great tools for documents with multiple pages and doing like masked out frames and
Okay.
windows and speech bubbles and stuff.
I'll definitely like I've been like I have a lot of friends who they swear by Clip Studio like and I'm just like it's that thing where like you know as soon as you get a new piece of technology and you're like I know there's going to be a learning curve and I just don't want to deal with the learning curve right now.
No,
But I
I get
know
that.
it's in the future. I could see it coming at me, and I'm just like, all right, I'll when I'm done with classes, I'll sit down and properly give it a look. But yeah, no, I've heard wonderful things when it comes to comics.
So like I want to try a graphic novel. I just don't have a story in me that needs to be told in that format. I feel like I'm
Mm-hmm.
good at creating the elements to a story, like role playing games,
Mm-hmm.
characters, locations, NPCs. I'm good at all that. But in the process of that, like I have an idea of a final story, but I don't have the confidence in myself to do anything to fruition that way. But again, that's just me. I know if I did it and practiced it, I'd be good at it, but I'm scared.
So I believe the best way to combat that is baby steps because graphic novels are a huge undertaking, and I can't believe
Mm-hmm.
I signed on to do another one. But it's a I think baby steps because, like I mentioned, I'm doing a little 20-page comic. And I think starting off slow, starting off with like a 5-page, challenge yourself, what's the shortest comic I can make? Like with a beginning, middle, and end. And then so a big part of my like New Year's resolution was reading more, and I've been making a point to read more varied graphic novels, and there's some that are just beautiful, surreal, like scenes. There's no
Mm-hmm.
beginning, middle in it. It's just a beautiful scene that like is very surreal and like there's no set one way to do a graphic novel, and sometimes the narrative can be incredibly non-sequential.
Mm. Okay.
So I'm not sure
So
if he did I'm not sure if he did hourly comic day at any point.
no, what's that?
So February 1st is hourly comic day, and you're supposed to do an hourly comic every hour that you're awake. And this could be like one or two panels, like usually one or two, just so that you don't like stretch yourself too thin. But you end up with like a lot of really great like fluid, like a lot of messy, a lot of like really brave comic panels that you see on Twitter, that you see online, and it's just kind of a wonderful way to get into comics, where it forces you to just write about your day in comic format.
Oh wow. See, I figure if I did do any comic or anything, it would be very like Adrian Tomine inspired or
Mm-hmm.
very Daniel Klaus cuz like I feel like that I could maybe manage.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I I threw out like you mentioned that you're very set on making the product, and one of the biggest things, because again, my problem was I keep trying to make a product out of things. Letting go of perfection for your first attempts at things is like the hardest stuff to do when you're trying something new.
I can't let go of perfection.
So I know, but like
All right. Well, as we wind it down, where would people be able to find some of your stuff? I know you have emilyAillustrates.com, right?
yeah.
And then
So I
yeah.
I do have my shop closed while I am in school, just because I could not handle doing both as well as a bunch of other stuff. So if you wanted to find me, it would be as Emily A illustrates on kind of almost every social media except for I think Twitter, which is MA illustrates. And you can find me in my next con and my only con so far for the year is actually going to be Anime Boston. So at the end of this month. So
Oh.
if you don't want to celebrate Easter at home and you're in Boston,
Oh, fun. And then so the book that you were talking about that you just finished doing illustrations for is Ghost Roast.
it's Ghost
Yeah.
Roast. You can find it, not to sound like a cliche, but wherever books are sold. It's through Harper Alley and HarperCollins with their imprint of Versified.
It is really beautiful. I love the
You.
style. It kind of reminds me of Paper Girls. Uh,
Oh yes, Paper Girls.
okay.
Yeah,
Like
no,
you have
I
the solid color tones, but I mean you've always been really good at
so
color. Okay.
I thank you. That actually, I have to shout out to my wonderful colorist, Aishwarya Tandem. Like, just she is an incredible colorist, and she saw my sample pages and she ran with it, and already has an amazing eye for color. And she really helped me out. So Aishwarya, and I think
Awesome.
she's tuned in. But if you look up Aishwarya Tandem, she's everywhere. She's phenomenal.
Was it difficult or awkward not getting to do the colors yourself?
I think there's a part of me that was like, I'm this again. This is my first major publication, and actually my first major comic. And I think it hurt just because I was like, damn it, I couldn't not make the cut, but I couldn't work fast enough to do both because I think
Mm.
I got bogged down in certain parts of the process. But I think honestly, like, there's always that little part of you as an artist that's like, damn, I want to do everything. But one, having such a beautiful end product, if I ever had any doubts, blasted that out of the water. But two, being able to, I love the creative process when it's collaborative. I have a big history with like working in the theater during college and having
Mm.
that kind of collaborative element. I love it seeing people take something that you worked on and through their own eyes kind of reinvent it. And think the only thing I gave Ajwari a little key for just like there were certain colors I just wanted to make sure were like present in certain characters, but I think Ajwari heard the words like she got the key and she heard vivid, and she just created just like such a wonderful end product, and I can gush for hours about her work. So
That's awesome. Well, for the listeners, that is GHOSTROAST, Ghost Roast, and it's kind of like a ghost hunter, and there's some type of mystery involved, right?
yeah, it's a middle grade graphic novel about a girl who embarrassingly has a Ghostbuster as a father, but then also can see ghosts. So there's history, there's mystery, there's a little bit of romance. It's all good things.
Well, I promise you I'm not going to forget you exist over the next 2 years. I'm going to be following everything you do very closely.
Oh, same, absolutely, honestly. Meeting you again at Logotopia, I was like, oh, we were table mates.
Yeah, it's just insane that, like, you live in St. Pete, I live in St. Pete, but somehow, and we have so many of the same friends on Facebook and Instagram. It's like, I don't know how we didn't ever run into each other since that event, since Comic-Con.
Honestly, I blame being an introvert.
I get it. All right, well, thank you so much, Emily, for joining.
Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful time, and I honestly, such a blast. Thank you.
Are you ready to paint your own canvas in the real estate world as a homeowner? It's Leslie Haas from Realty One Group Sunshine, and I'm here to talk home equity, your masterpiece in the housing market. Imagine owning a piece of property that's not just a place to call yours, but also an investment opportunity. It's time to take that brush and start creating equity in your dream home. With interest rates on the verge of dropping, get ahead of the curve and secure your artistic haven before the next rush. Whether you're a first-time homebuyer or upgrading your studio, let's sketch out your home ownership dreams together. To learn more, visit tampabayhomesforsale.realestate.